The legends were just stories, right? The stories had always sounded like fairy tales. Long ago, the elders spoke of a lost species, humans, warriors unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Merciless, unstoppable, shadows that struck without warning, but they had vanished long before Commander Solara was born. She never believed the stories, until now. The sky over Xeris 4 burned. Commander Solara stood on the battlefield, gripping her plasma rifle. Her once proud army lay scattered, defeated. The Vorn Dominion had come with overwhelming force, their war machines crushing everything in their path. The Xerans had fought bravely, but they were no match for the brutal efficiency of the Vorn. Her breathing was heavy. Her body ached. A deep wound on her side burned, but she ignored the pain. Around her, Xeran soldiers lay motionless, the scent of scorched metal and flesh thick in the air. "Commander, we have to fall back," her lieutenant, Terran, shouted. His armor was cracked, his eyes wide with fear. Solara clenched her jaw. "There is no fallback, Terran. This is our last line of defense." A deep, rumbling sound echoed through the valley. Vorn warships hovered above, their cannons charging for the final attack. She could see the massive soldiers of the Vorn Dominion marching forward, their red eyes glowing beneath their armored helmets. This was the end. Solara closed her eyes for just a second. She had sworn to protect her people. She had never known fear, but now, staring at death, she realized there was no hope left. Then, the impossible happened. A whispers in the wind. A sharp whistle cut through the air. Not a Xyran sound. Not a Vorn sound. Something else. Then, the shadows moved. Out of nowhere, the battlefield exploded, not from Vorn weapons, but from something far more precise. Silent streaks of energy cut through the darkness, striking down Vorn soldiers with terrifying accuracy. Solara's eyes widened. The Vorn soldiers were falling, but there was no army. No warning. Only ghosts in the night. She turned in shock as something fast and deadly moved through the battlefield. Blurs of black armor, figures taller than any Xeran or Vorn, weapons unlike anything she had ever seen. The Vorn screamed in confusion, their massive warriors, once invincible, now being cut down in seconds. A figure stepped out of the smoke. Towering, armored in black and gray metal. A helmet covered its face, glowing with an eerie red visor. Solara's heart pounded. It spoke, but not in Xeran, not in Vorn. In a deep, commanding language she had only ever heard in whispers. Human, a life saved by myth. Her body felt frozen. This couldn't be real. Humans did not exist. They were stories, nothing more. Legends told by old warriors, myths meant to scare children. But the Vorn were running. The unstoppable Vorn Dominion, fleeing. A deep voice crackled through her helmet's communicator. "Xeran Commander, you are coming with us." She turned, aiming her weapon at the armored figure. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The warrior moved too fast. Before she could react, he was inches from her, knocking the rifle from her hands with an effortless motion. "No time for questions," he said. His voice was low, emotionless, cold. A sudden pain shot through Solara's body. She looked down. Her wound was worse than she thought. The world blurred around her. Her legs gave out. She collapsed. But before she hit the ground, the warrior caught her. "We got her," the deep voice spoke into a communicator. "Extracting now." As the world faded into darkness, Solara realized something terrifying. The legends were real. And if humans were back, what else had the galaxy forgotten? Ghosts of war. The awakening. Solara drifted in and out of consciousness. Her body was weightless, suspended between pain and exhaustion. She could hear faint voices, low, commanding, unfamiliar. The air smelled different, metallic and sterile, not the scorched battlefield she had fallen on. She tried to open her eyes, but they felt heavy. Her limbs refused to move. something cold pressed against her skin. A machine. No, several. She could feel a pulse of energy humming through her veins, repairing her wounds with a precision she had never experienced before. Then she heard it. A voice. Vital, stabilizing. She's waking up. Her heart pounded. The voice was deep, human, real. The legends were true. She forced her eyes open. The world around her was nothing like Xeran technology. The walls were smooth metal, lined with displays showing readings she didn't understand. Soft white lights cast an eerie glow across the room. The air was too clean, filtered, and controlled. She wasn't on Xeris 4 anymore. She was somewhere far worse. First contact. She turned her head. A figure stood near a display screen, monitoring her condition. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in sleek black armor with no markings. His helmet, featureless except for a faint red glow, concealed his face. She tensed. The Vorn had captured her once before, interrogated her, tortured her. Was this the same? Then the helmeted figure spoke. "You're lucky we found you in time." His voice was cold, professional, and undeniably human. Silara's breath caught in her throat. She had fought wars, faced death without fear. But this was impossible. She tried to sit up. Pain shot through her body, forcing her back down. "Easy," the human said, stepping forward. His movements were calculated, not rushed. A soldier, a warrior. Silara gritted her teeth. "Where am I?" The human tilted his head slightly, studying her. Then, without answering, he pressed something on his wrist. The door behind him slid open silently. Two more figures entered, both in the same black armor. The one in the center removed his helmet. Silara stared. His face was rough, lined with scars, his hair cut short. His eyes were sharp, calculating, unreadable. A predator's gaze. "I am Captain Darius Kane," he said, stepping closer. His voice was calm, but there was something beneath it, something dangerous. "And you, Commander Xilara, just had your first encounter with the real ghosts of war. The truth about the legends." Xilara clenched her fists. The Vorn Dominion was winning. "They wiped out my forces. Then, you appeared, just like that. Who are you? Why are you helping me?" Kane exhaled, as if debating how much to say. "Your people don't know the truth about us. You think we disappeared. You think we're myths." He leaned in slightly. "But we never left. We were watching." Silara's blood ran cold. "Watching? For how long?" "We don't interfere in every war," Kane continued. "Most conflicts burn themselves out. Civilizations rise, fall, repeat the cycle. It's not our concern." Silara narrowed her eyes. "Then why now?" The other human soldiers remained silent, standing like statues. Silara realized something unsettling. These were not ordinary warriors. They didn't fidget. They didn't shift their weight. They didn't even blink. Trained, disciplined, lethal. Kane finally answered. "Because the Vorn Dominion is making a mistake." Silara frowned. "What mistake?" Kane's expression darkened. "They think they're the strongest force in the galaxy." He turned to one of his soldiers. "Show her." The soldier tapped on the screen. A holographic display appeared, showing a Xyran battlefield, but not just any battlefield. Her battlefield. Silara's stomach twisted as she saw her own forces crushed under the Vorn's attack, their once powerful warships reduced to wreckage. Xeris 4 was lost. But then the screen shifted, and what she saw next made her breath catch. Vorn warships, entire fleets, destroyed. Not by Xeran weapons, not by any force she recognized. By humans. Small, shadowy ships moving like ghosts, cutting through the Dominion's forces with precision unlike anything she had ever seen. The humans hadn't just fought the Vorn. They had dismantled them. It wasn't war. It was a hunt. And the humans were the predators. Celara looked up at Cain, suddenly understanding the fear behind the old legends. The Vorn always claimed they were the strongest, Cain said. But that was before they woke us up. A choice with no good answer. Celara's mind raced. The Vorn Dominion was ruthless, but they weren't fools. If they were losing to the humans, it meant one thing. You're planning something. Cain gave a slight smirk. Smart. Celara swallowed hard. What do you want from me? The room fell silent. Then Cain said something that changed everything. You're going to help us end the Vorn Dominion. Celara's chest tightened. She had fought the Vorn for years, seen them slaughter her people without mercy. But now she was trapped between two unstoppable forces, the Dominion and the humans. And one truth became terrifyingly clear. The humans weren't just here to fight the Vorn. They were here to remind the galaxy why it once feared them. The unseen army. A war unlike any other. Celara sat in silence, staring at the holographic projections in front of her. The images of the battlefield, the wreckage of Vorn warships, and the silent precision of the human forces played on a loop. Her mind struggled to comprehend it. For her entire life, the Vorn Dominion had been the ultimate power in the galaxy. They crushed entire worlds, enslaved species, and ruled through sheer brutality. No one had ever stood against them and survived. Until now. Until humans. She exhaled slowly, looking at Captain Darius Cain, who watched her with an unreadable expression. His scared face held no emotion, but his presence alone was enough to make her uneasy. This isn't a war, Celara finally said, her voice quiet but firm. This is something else. Cain leaned back slightly, arms crossed. He wasn't smiling, but there was a glint in his eyes. We don't fight wars the way you do, Commander. He motioned toward the holographic display. The image zoomed out, revealing a massive, hidden structure floating deep in space. A base. A fortress. Celara's breath caught. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The sheer size of it dwarfed even the largest Vorn command ships. Welcome to the real reason we've been watching, Cain said. The Ghost Fleet. A low hum vibrated through the walls as the human ship approached the mysterious fortress. Through the viewport, Celara could see hundreds of dark, streamlined warships docked around it. Not the massive, bulky warships of the Zirans or the terrifying Vorn dreadnoughts. These were something else. Stealthier. Deadlier. The Vorn think they own this galaxy, Cain continued as the ship docked. They have no idea what's coming. The doors hissed open, and Celara followed him out into the base. The moment she stepped inside, she felt it. An energy in the air, an unshakable sense of control. This wasn't just a military base. It was a war machine, built for one purpose: to end threats before they even knew they were being hunted. Training for the unthinkable. Celara walked through the corridors, trying to understand what she was seeing. The humans were methodical, their technology years ahead of anything in the known galaxy. But what unsettled her the most were the soldiers. Not just Cain's squad. All of them. Thousands of them, moving like ghosts, speaking in low, efficient tones. No wasted words. No hesitation. Every action had a purpose. She had fought wars for years. She had trained the best Ziran warriors. But this, how do you train them to be like this? She finally asked. Cain stopped and turned to her, his expression unreadable. We don't train soldiers. Celara frowned. Then what do you call this? She gestured to the silent, lethal warriors passing by. Cain took a step closer. We train hunters. The first test. Celara wasn't just here to observe. The humans wanted something from her. She realized this when Cain led her into a massive training hall. The walls were lined with unfamiliar weapons, some resembling projectile-based firearms, others completely alien. A dozen human soldiers stood in formation, waiting. You've spent years fighting the Vorn, Cain said. I want to see how you fight. Celara narrowed her eyes. You want me to fight them? Kane nodded. Show us what you can do. She knew this was a test, a challenge. But she wasn't about to back down. She stepped forward, rolling her shoulders, her body still sore from her injuries but functional. She had fought for survival her entire life. She wouldn't let humans intimidate her now. The first soldier stepped forward. A man, taller than her, moving with unnatural speed. He attacked first. Silara barely had time to react before his fist came toward her face. She dodged, countered with a quick strike to his side. But he didn't slow down. His movements were calculated, efficient. He wasn't fighting with emotion. He was analyzing her. Silara gritted her teeth. She wasn't going to lose. She shifted her weight, using speed over strength, ducking under a second attack and striking the soldier's knee, sending him stumbling. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Kane watched, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Then, without warning, 2 more soldiers stepped forward. Silara exhaled sharply. You want me to fight all of them? Kane didn't answer. Because this wasn't a test of skill. This was a test of survival. The moment of truth. By the time it was over, Silara was on her knees, gasping for breath. She had taken down 2 of them, but the third had caught her. She had never fought anyone like them before. They had no patterns, no wasted motion. They learned her style mid-fight and adapted instantly. You did better than I expected, Kane finally said. Silara glared up at him. That wasn't a test. That was a lesson. Kane smirked slightly. Now you're starting to understand. She clenched her fists. What do you want from me? The room fell silent. Then Kane answered with words that would change everything. We want you to help us destroy the Vorn. Silara froze. She had dreamed of the Dominion's downfall for years, but to join humans, the same beings her people once feared. Could she trust them? Could anyone? Before she could respond, an alarm blared throughout the facility. The humans reacted instantly, moving into formation. Kane tapped his communicator. Talk to me. A voice crackled through the channel. Sir, we have a situation. The Vorn just launched a full-scale invasion on another world. Kane looked at Silara. Well, Commander, he said, his voice calm. Are you coming or not? The first strike. The decision. Silara had spent her life fighting wars. She had led countless battles, watched friends die, and stood against impossible odds. But never had she been given a choice like this. Join the humans, the most feared ghosts in the galaxy. Or refuse, and risk the Vorn Dominion destroying everything. She stood in the war room of the human base, staring at the holographic projection of the invasion. The Vorn had begun their assault on Tarsus V, a Xeran-controlled world, wiping out cities with brutal efficiency. The same enemy that had shattered her forces on Xeris IV. The same enemy that had left her to die. Her fists clenched as she turned to Captain Darius Kane, who stood beside her with arms crossed, his expression unreadable. What's your plan? She asked. Kane raised an eyebrow. You're coming. Silara exhaled sharply. I don't trust you, human. Kane smirked. Good. That means you're smart. He gestured toward the hologram. We don't fight like Xerans. We don't fight like the Vorn. This is how we do things. The image shifted, displaying a new tactical approach. Not an open war. Not a massive fleet battle. But something far more precise. Silara frowned. You're not attacking them head-on. Kane shook his head. We don't waste time fighting armies. He zoomed in on the display, showing a Vorn command dreadnought hovering above Tarsus V. We take out their leaders, cut the head off the snake, and the body dies. Silara narrowed her eyes. You think killing one commander will stop an invasion? Kane's expression darkened. Not one. The hologram highlighted 6 key Vorn command ships. All of them. Silara's breath caught. They weren't planning a battle. They were planning an assassination. The drop. The mission was simple, on paper. A covert insertion, silent execution of the Vorn commanders, and an extraction before the enemy even knew what happened. It sounded impossible. Yet, as Silara geared up in the human armory, slipping into a sleek combat suit that felt unnervingly lightweight and efficient, she realized. To the humans, this was just another operation. She glanced at Kane's squad, ghosts in dark armor, moving without sound. Each of them a master of war, their weapons modified with suppressors and energy dampeners. They fought like predators, while the rest of the galaxy fought like soldiers. Silara wasn't sure if she was terrified or impressed. "We drop in 2 minutes," Kane's voice crackled in her earpiece. "You better keep up, Commander." Silara scowled. "Just don't slow me down, human." Kane actually chuckled. Then the drop bay doors opened, and the mission began. The Ghost Strike. Silara had done orbital drops before, but never like this. Instead of clunky Zyran drop pods crashing into the surface with explosive force, the humans used silent, atmosphere-piercing gliders, barely detectable on scanners. As they descended, she could see the burning skyline of Tarsus V below. Vorn war machines rolled through the streets, firing at Zyran resistance fighters, crushing buildings beneath their massive walkers. It was a slaughter. The humans weren't here to save the city. They were here to end the invasion before it could even begin. Kane's voice came through the comms. 10 seconds to impact. Stay sharp. Silara braced herself. Then, the world blurred as her glider adjusted, shifting her seamlessly into position near the largest Vorn Command dreadnought, hidden within the towering wreckage of a collapsed skyscraper. The moment they landed, the humans moved like shadows. No sound, no wasted motion. They were already infiltrating the enemy stronghold before Silara had fully unstrapped herself. She cursed and followed. The real battle had begun. Inside the beast, the Vorn dreadnought was a fortress, heavily guarded, crawling with elite soldiers and bio-enhanced warlords. But it didn't matter. The humans cut through them like whispers in the dark. Every shot was precise, silent, lethal. Silara had fought wars her entire life. She had seen elite special forces, commandos, assassins. But this was something else. Humans didn't fight. They hunted. The Vorn never even had a chance to sound the alarm. One by one, their commanders fell, their bodies hitting the ground before they even knew what had happened. Silara watched Kane take down a Vorn general with a single strike to the throat, silencing him before his body collapsed. It was so fast, so calculated, that she almost forgot to breathe. "Command center secured," one of the soldiers reported. "Final target located," another said. Silara's heart pounded. They were going to win this battle in under 10 minutes. But then, the alarms blared to life. Something had gone wrong. The Vorn's last defense. "We've been compromised," a soldier growled. Kane cursed under his breath. Silara spun toward the exit, her rifle raised, as a massive door slammed shut behind them. Then she heard it. A low, inhuman growl. Something big moved in the shadows beyond the corridor. Incoming. A massive Vorn warlord, twice the size of any soldier she had faced before, charged into the room. Its cybernetic arms pulsed with energy, its clawed hands dripping with some kind of toxin. A bio-enhanced juggernaut. Silara barely had time to react before it slammed into one of the human soldiers, sending him flying across the room. She fired instinctively, but the creature shrugged off her shots like they were nothing. Kane didn't hesitate. He moved like lightning, diving past the warlord, slicing into its armor with a high-frequency blade that cut through steel. The warlord roared, swinging wildly, smashing walls, and sending debris flying. Silara dodged, firing at its exposed joints. For the first time, the humans weren't in control. This wasn't just a commander. This was the Vorn's last weapon, their final line of defense. And if they didn't kill it soon, none of them were getting out alive. The truth about humanity. The monster in the dark. The Vorn warlord lurched forward, its massive, cybernetic arms smashing through metal walls like paper. Sparks erupted from the impact as debris rained down around them. Silara barely managed to roll out of the way before a razor-sharp claw slammed into the ground where she had just been standing. The warlord was bigger, faster, and stronger than anything she had faced before. Its armor was thick, reinforced with bioengineered plating, and its blood-red eyes glowed with pure, mindless rage. "Keep moving," Cain barked, dodging another attack with inhuman reflexes. Silara gritted her teeth and fired her rifle directly at the warlord's exposed joints. The shot struck home, burning into its flesh, but the creature barely reacted. It roared, then lunged straight at her. She had no time to dodge. The impact hit her like a meteor, sending her crashing into the far wall. The pain exploded through her ribs as she gasped for air. The warlord loomed over her, its claw rising for the kill. Then, a flash of silver. Cain's blade tore through the warlord's wrist. The creature howled, recoiling in pain as Cain landed in front of her, weapon raised. "On your feet, Commander." His voice was calm. Too calm. Silara pushed herself up, wincing. Cain wasn't even breathing hard. And for the first time, she noticed something. The way he moved. The way he reacted before the warlord even attacked. It wasn't just training. It was something else. The warlord let out a final, enraged shriek before Cain moved faster than she thought possible, plunging his blade straight into the warlord's throat. The creature's screams turned into gurgles. It collapsed, lifeless. Silence filled the room. Silara slowly exhaled, her mind racing. This wasn't just combat skill. Something was very, very wrong. The human secret. They regrouped quickly, the mission still in progress. But Silara couldn't shake the unsettling realization growing inside her. The humans weren't just good at war. They were unnatural. She had fought for years, studied tactics, trained warriors. She knew the limits of biology, of reaction time, of endurance. Cain. He wasn't normal. Neither were the soldiers at his side. Silara turned to him as they made their way through the dreadnought's corridors. "What are you?" Cain didn't react at first, but there was a slight shift in his posture, a flicker of something in his expression. He didn't answer immediately. Then he finally said, "We were built for war." Silara frowned. "What does that mean?" Cain stopped and faced her. "The old legends your people whisper about how we vanished." His eyes were cold. "They're only half true." Silara's heart pounded. "We never vanished." Cain's voice was low, dangerous. "We were erased. The great exile." They moved through the halls, clearing rooms as Cain continued speaking. "Centuries ago, humans weren't like this." He gestured at himself. "We were like you. Flesh, bone, limited by nature." Silara kept her rifle ready, listening intently. "But the galaxy feared us. Not because of numbers, not because of our weapons." He paused. "Because of what we became." Silara narrowed her eyes. "What did you become?" Cain hesitated, just for a second. "We adapted. We modified ourselves." He looked at her, and for the first time, she felt genuine fear. "We made ourselves better." The last war. Silara's mind raced. The old stories told of human wars, of their unpredictable nature, their unstoppable aggression. But if Cain was telling the truth, they hadn't just been warriors. They had transcended. Cain continued, his voice steady. "The old empires feared what we were becoming. Faster, stronger, smarter. We didn't just evolve, we took control of our evolution. They couldn't stop us, so they united against us." Silara stared in shock. "The entire galaxy." Cain nodded. 100 species, 1,000 fleets. They threw everything at us. Silara swallowed hard, and they won. Cain chuckled. But there was no humor in it. No, they didn't. He turned back toward the exit. We let them think they did. The return of the ghosts. Silara's breath hitched. You let them exile you. Kane nodded. The war wasn't worth it. We had nothing to gain by ruling the galaxy. So we disappeared. We erased ourselves from history, went into hiding, let the galaxy believe we were gone. Silara felt a chill crawl up her spine. And now, she whispered. Kane's eyes darkened. Now, we're back. The true purpose. The final Vorn command center was ahead. But Silara barely noticed it now. Her mind was too consumed by what she had learned. She turned to Kane, her voice hoarse. Why reveal this to me? He stopped, looking at her with that unreadable gaze. Because we need to know where you stand, Commander. We're not just here to stop the Vorn. We're here to change everything. Silara's pulse raced. What does that mean? Kane took a step closer, his voice cold as steel. It means the balance of power is shifting. And the galaxy is about to learn what happens when humanity stops hiding. The incoming storm. Before Silara could respond, an urgent voice crackled over the comms. Kane, we have movement. Incoming fleet, bigger than expected. Kane's jaw tightened. How many? A pause. Then, all of them. Silara's blood went cold. The entire Vorn Dominion was coming. This wasn't just a battle. This was the beginning of something far, far bigger. Kane exhaled slowly, then turned to Silara. Welcome to the real war, Commander. And with that, the final battle began. The war changes everything. The sky burns. The war had reached them. From the warship's command deck, Silara could see the full force of the Vorn Dominion descending upon them. Massive dreadnoughts, battleships, carriers, an armada built for conquest. The stars were blotted out by the sheer number of enemy warships. Thousands. She had fought many battles, but never had she seen a fleet this size. This wasn't just a counterattack. This was an extermination. They're sending everything they have, Silara muttered. Beside her, Captain Darius Kane watched the unfolding battle with arms crossed, his expression calm. Too calm. The Zirans would have panicked at an enemy force this large. The Vorn would have called for reinforcements. But the humans, they were silent, calculating. Silara turned to Kane. You knew they would come like this, didn't you? Kane didn't blink. Of course. Silara exhaled sharply. Then what's the plan? Kane's lips curled into a smirk. Now we teach them what happens when they underestimate us. A different kind of war. Silara expected a fleet-wide counterattack, a battle between massive warships. That was how wars were fought. But the humans didn't fight wars like everyone else. Instead of sending their fleet into direct combat, Kane's forces vanished. One by one, human warships disappeared from Vorn scanners, not retreating, but hiding. Silara frowned. You're not fighting. Kane gave a low chuckle. We are fighting, Commander. You just don't see it yet. The Vorn's first mistake. The Vorn moved into position, preparing to fire on the planet below. They thought the humans had fled. But the moment the first Vorn battleship powered its weapons, something terrifying happened. A single human warship reappeared, directly behind the lead dreadnought. And before the Vorn could react, it fired. Not a traditional energy blast, not a fleet-destroying missile, but something worse. A pulse of red energy rippled across the dreadnought's hull. A moment later, the massive Vorn warship turned against its own fleet. Silara gasped. What did you just do? Kane smiled. We took control of their flagship. Silara's eyes widened. That's impossible. Kane shook his head. Nothing's impossible, Commander. It's just difficult. Before the Vorn could even process what had happened, the hijacked dreadnought opened fire on its own fleet. Panic erupted among the enemy ranks. Chaos. Disarray. And the humans. They were just getting started. The art of breaking an enemy. Silara had always believed that war was about strength, numbers, strategy, power. But what she was witnessing was something else entirely. The humans didn't fight to win battles. They fought to make their enemy believe they had already lost. As the Vorn fleet scrambled to understand what was happening, more human warships emerged from the void. Not in formation, not in an attack wave. They appeared behind enemy ships, inside their ranks, slipping through gaps in their defenses like ghosts. One by one, the Vorn fleet collapsed in on itself. Command ships were seized. Flagships were turned against their own forces. By the time the Vorn realized the trap, it was too late. Silara couldn't believe what she was seeing. "You're not fighting them," she whispered. "You're breaking them." Cain turned to her, his eyes sharp. "War isn't about killing your enemy. It's about making sure they never dare fight you again." The final battle begins. The Vorn were losing, and they knew it. But they weren't finished yet. As the remaining warships regrouped, a massive tear in space opened above the battlefield. Silara's stomach twisted as a colossal ship emerged, larger than anything she had ever seen. A Vorn Titan-class warship. A ship so large it could wipe out entire planets with a single strike. Cain's smirk faded. "I was wondering when they'd bring that in." Silara turned to him. "You expected this." Cain nodded. "Always plan for your enemy's desperation." She exhaled sharply. "And what's the plan for this?" Cain glanced at the Titan-class warship as its superweapon began to charge. "We finish this war." He tapped his communicator. "All units, execute final phase." And then, the battlefield exploded into chaos. The Titan falls. The Vorn unleashed everything they had. The Titan-class warship's primary weapon began to glow, ready to fire. Silara braced herself, expecting the humans to dodge, counter, or retreat. But they didn't. Instead, they went straight for it. Hundreds of human strike ships, small, fast, nearly invisible to scanners, swarmed the Titan like a pack of wolves. Instead of firing from a distance, they infiltrated the ship mid-battle. Silara had never seen anything like it. The humans didn't just destroy their enemies. They got inside their skulls. The war ends in silence. It took less than an hour. An hour for the Vorn's greatest warship to be hijacked from within. An hour for their fleet to turn to chaos. An hour for the most feared empire in the galaxy to crumble. The Vorn command signals vanished. The remaining ships fled. The invasion force collapsed. And just like that, the war was over. Not with an explosion. Not with a grand, dramatic final battle. But with silence. Silara turned to Cain. Her voice was hoarse. "That's it." Cain's expression was unreadable. "No," he said. "This was just the beginning." The aftermath. The battlefield was quiet. The Vorn had been shattered. The galaxy had just witnessed the impossible. The unstoppable Dominion defeated in a single battle. But Silara wasn't celebrating. She turned to Cain. "You could have fought them head-on." Cain shook his head. "No, we couldn't." "Why not?" Cain exhaled slowly. "Because the Vorn weren't the real threat." Silara's stomach twisted. "Then what is?" Cain looked at the battlefield one last time. "What happens when the rest of the galaxy realizes we're back?" And with those words, Silara finally understood. The war wasn't over. It was only changing. And humanity had just reminded the galaxy why they should have stayed afraid. The return of the true enemy. The war was over. The fear had just begun. Silara stood on the bridge of the human warship, staring at the silent ruins of the Vorn fleet. A battle that should have taken months, maybe years, had ended in a single night. Not because of strength. Not because of numbers. But because the humans never fought fair. And now the galaxy knew. The ghosts of war had returned. Silara exhaled sharply, turning to Captain Darius Cain. He stood at the edge of the command deck, watching the wreckage below. "You didn't just win this war," she said, her voice quiet. "You sent a message." Cain didn't deny it. He simply said, "Good." But something in his tone made her uneasy. This wasn't victory. This was a warning. The silence before the storm. Word traveled fast. Within hours, the entire galactic network erupted with the news. The unstoppable Vorn Dominion had fallen. Their once mighty fleets lay in ruins, their generals dead or missing. And worst of all, the enemy that defeated them wasn't supposed to exist. The humans, the myths, the ghosts, the long-forgotten terror of the stars, were real. And they were stronger than ever. Some factions rejoiced. The Vorn had been tyrants, ruling through brutality and fear. Their fall meant freedom for many enslaved worlds. But others saw something worse. Because if the Vorn, the greatest empire in the galaxy, could be crushed overnight, then what chance did the rest of them have? A galaxy at the brink. Silara watched the reports come in. The great powers of the galaxy were reacting exactly as Cain had predicted. Some races sent diplomats, eager to form alliances before it was too late. Others began strengthening their fleets, preparing for the war they believed was coming. And some whispered of a second purge. "They're afraid of you," Silara murmured. Cain tilted his head slightly. "They should be." Silara narrowed her eyes. "You're not stopping here, are you?" Cain turned to face her. "Stopping? No, Commander." His voice was calm. Too calm. "We didn't come back to be left alone. We came back to remind them who we are." The warning. The humans had barely returned. And already, the galaxy was on the verge of war. Silara wasn't sure who frightened her more. The panicked factions scrambling to prepare for the next great conflict, or the humans watching it all unfold with cold, calculating patience. "You planned this," she said, realization dawning. "You didn't just want to defeat the Vorn. You wanted the galaxy to see." Cain nodded. "Fear is a useful tool." Silara exhaled sharply. "You don't just want to survive this time." She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You want to rule." Cain didn't respond. Because he didn't need to. The first enemy falls, but the greatest one remains. And then, the distress signal came. A deep, low-frequency transmission that cut through every channel, overriding even human encryption. Cain's expression changed instantly. "That's impossible," one of his officers muttered. The signal was old. Very old. Older than the Vorn. Older than the humans' exile. The crew worked quickly, decoding the transmission. Silara watched the color drain from their faces. She turned to Cain. "What is it?" He exhaled slowly, his posture stiff. "Something we thought was gone." Silara frowned. "The Vorn weren't your real enemy, were they?" Cain's jaw tightened. "No. They were running from something much worse. The enemy that even humans fear." The decrypted signal played on the main display. At first, it was just static, a deep, broken voice barely recognizable as speech. Then, a single word spoken in a language long forgotten. But Cain understood it immediately. His fingers curled into fists. "What did it say?" Silara demanded. Cain didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed on the screen, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he answered. It said, "We are awake." A long silence filled the bridge. Then Cain turned to his crew. "Prepare the fleet." Silara stared in shock. "Who are they?" Cain's next words sent a chill through her soul. "The ones who exiled us. The final war begins." Everything Silara thought she knew shattered in that moment. The Vorn Dominion was never the real threat. The humans hadn't just been hiding. They had been waiting. Because the true enemy, the one even humanity feared, was finally returning. And this time, no one was ready. The war with the Vorn had been a test. The real war was just beginning. Cain exhaled slowly, watching the stars. "Now," he murmured, "we see who survives." And with those words, the final battle for the fate of the galaxy began.